When I say the words school starting back up, do images of anarchy, flames, chaos come to your mind and you feel overwhelmed in guiding your family and your kids because you know what's happened in the past? Or maybe this is the first year you have kids going to school. Well, hey, I have 5 tips that will help that process go a little smoother for you this year. Hey friend, do the daily demands of family life leave you exhausted with no time for yourself? Ready to make self-care and healthy boundaries a natural part of your day, all while embracing your roles as a wife and mom? Well, I'm so glad you're here. I'm Christina, married 16 years to a neurodiverse man, mom of 3 neurodiverse kids, and many more roles. Welcome to the Moms and Neurodiverse Families podcast. Get ready to begin your self-care journey. Grab your Santé latte and listen in as we take a small step towards a healthier you. I can clearly recall earlier years of when school began. It was a time that filled me with excitement because I loved the new pencils and pens. Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Paper Source, all those stores were so fun for me to be in. So shopping for school supplies, there was joy in that, but mostly there was this feeling of dread knowing what the expectations were and what my kids and family were able to do. And I remember so many years there would be, it felt like chaos just reigned for the first month about of school starting. And sometimes it even went longer. It all depended upon how severe the adjustment was. I remember specifically there was days picking up my kids, and as soon as they saw me every single day, they would just be bursting out in tears and crying and falling apart. And the teachers would say to me, I think it's something that you're doing at home, because they were fine when they were at school. We all understand, right, that our kids were working so hard to hold it together while they're at school, dealing with so many unknowns and people not understanding them and frustrations, that when they see someone who is loving and trustworthy, they let it all out at that moment. Bless those teachers. It's not an easy job, but very frustrating when you get the blame for why they're having that reaction. And in the mornings, I remember having like 2 hours to get 2 kids ready for school in the morning because there were so many meltdowns. And when I began understanding about neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, I saw everything differently. And I'm going to share with you the 5 P's to help you for this upcoming year. So why is this even important? If your kids go to traditional school, whether public or private, charter, there is a great change in schedules from their summer to the school year. Now, if you homeschool, there is a change in schedules, but yours is not quite as abrupt, but there still is a change, but you can slowly ramp that up because you have so much flexibility. But for traditional schools, the change is so drastic that it is a overwhelm to their senses, because to expect, even for an adult, to go from vacation one day and to go back to work, there's an adjustment period. And that's for us as adults. It's the same for our kids, except it's even stronger. And when you spend the time preparing for school, it reduces the meltdowns. I have personally seen that. Also, it takes the unknowns. There's so many unknowns. Do you remember your first days of school when you were younger, or maybe even high school? Do you remember all the unknowns? There were a lot. And when we can reduce at least half of it was underneath our control, it makes it easier for our kids. What I'm about to share with you not only is for you, but also you can lay this out with your spouse and with your kids, and they can see the big picture, and they know what are the journey and what are the road stops along the way to get us to the point we need to be. When we can help others in our family understand the picture of what we're doing, it makes it so much easier, especially for younger kids. Sometimes they get really excited over like, oh, this is the next thing, and we need to be working on this now, Mom. I found that in my life, for my kids, when they're younger than 12 and under, they oftentimes will be very eager to be following this plan. For the older ones, They might be grumbling a bit, but they really do like knowing ahead of time, having it foreshadowed what's going to be happening. So I suggest, I'll have it in the show notes as well, but I suggest you talking with your kids and just writing down these 5 Ps and explaining, maybe even put in the calendar like, hey, we're going to work on it this week, and then this week is going to be this item. And when you do this, it allows their brains and their bodies to begin the shift. And the shift happens slowly over 6 weeks. When they get to the point of being at school, they have had the time to make all these adjustments. And I have heard many practitioners who work in this realm of neurodiversity, sensory processing, how the first 2 to 4 weeks when school starts, they call it the crazy time. It's crazy for the kids because of how they're adjusting. So how great would it be if you can just reduce some of that? So let's go jump in to the 5 Ps. Okay, the first thing, and I'm going to give you some timelines here. You adjust this as you know what your capacity is. But the first one is prepare. So 4 to 6 weeks before school starts. So get out your calendar, your planner, and count back 6 weeks at least. What I have learned and what my intentions are, but then of all the Murphys in the world that pop up, I need to be incredibly intentional. So I always go farther. So for you, 4 weeks might be fine. For me, I have to do at least 6 weeks. So 6 weeks before, 4 weeks is prepare. For preparing, you are going to be gathering all of the backpacks, lunch bags, coats, rain jackets, shoes, everything that you would need, depending where you live in the country or in the world. All the different items you need, you're going to gather at once. If you're going to be super achievers, you can go ahead and grab your winter stuff. I oftentimes wait until 4 weeks after school starts, and then I start looking at winter items. Depending upon where you're at, maybe winter comes earlier or later, or maybe you don't have winter. But I gather all those items that are the repeat almost every single day that may take extra time to purchase. For example, backpacks. For one child, their shoulders were so narrow that I realized after a while, like, wow, we're having all these issues with their backpacks and their shoulders. Well, it's because those straps are so wide that they weren't staying on their body and it was itching their skin. Another one of our kids, we had to find backpacks that had very smooth, very soft fabric on the covering of the straps because they could feel the fabric through their shirt. These type of items, I feel like they need lots of time to figure out because it is such a repeat usage. This includes clothes, socks. For many of you, socks is like an evil word because keeping socks on your kids might be really tricky, finding the right type of socks. So to me, this prepare, it's everything. And also even the school supplies that you've had maybe from last year that you carried over. It's getting it all together and figuring out what currently works, what's going to be passed down, what do you need to buy. And by preparing this way, you are able to save money, but also tangibly, the kids see these items and they're looking at it and they're thinking through, oh yeah, school and lunches. They'll be bringing up memories, talking about school lunches or about playing with friends in the playground. This is a very natural method for them to be thinking about school, but it's not intrusive. I really find that the best conversations to help my kids prepare is not when I have a direct one-to-one, but when we do a side about, and this would be a side about like looking at the items that we need to have for school and like, hey, what do you think of this backpack? I mean, how did that work for you last year? Did you like that? Did it work or not? And we're not talking directly about school, but because of our conversation, it does prepare them. Their mind is becoming more open to that. Now, for some kids, this is very helpful because they are very averse to schedule changes and they need the full 6 weeks to get their body and brains. I mean, I've been there with my kids where I'm like, okay, I'm glad I'm starting this now because you are in full mutiny. And by the time I would get to school, they were prepared for it. Now, again, if you're homeschooling, obviously there's way more that you're doing. You're looking at curriculum and you're discussing with them. But even doing that, like showing them the books, looking online, talking about what do they need for supplies, if they're extracurricular activities, that itself also will prepare them for the upcoming change in schedule. Number 2, purchase. You've gotten the school lists of supplies, and we now need to go out and purchase all the missing items from one, either the backpacks, lunch bags, things like that, but also the notebooks and pens and pencils, which that can be a big thing as well. I remember there were certain folders that one of my children would pick up, and their fingers would touch it and they go, "Ugh," like, Mom, I cannot use that. And that is a good thing to know, because if your child is like freaking out when they're touching the fabric, the material of their folder and notebook, then that's going to be an issue. And actually, I did find out with one of my kids. I kept asking, like, why aren't you bringing home this notebook? I don't understand. Like, son, you're not getting your assignments done. And then he explained to me, Mom, I can't even touch that notebook. It drives me crazy. And it was like an epiphany in my brain, like, oh, I didn't even think of that at all. That is something as well, of like, how do the materials feel? For some kids, it's not a big deal. And for others, it's a humongous deal. So you're going to do your purchasing. Okay, number 3, plan. By planning, we're talking about your evening, morning, and after school routines. For making a plan, my suggestion is to go over with your kids what your schedules were last year, when you went to bed, when you started the bedtime routine, when you woke up in the morning, when breakfast, and when you left for school, and then in the after school routine. I would just chat about that and ask them, what would you like it to be? How much time do you feel you need? I have one kiddo where they were go-getters and they were great at task initiation, but they needed time in the morning of quiet. Otherwise, they got very flustered. If they woke up late, it was an incredibly difficult day. They could get the stuff done, but they needed space. I have another one where they need 3 times the amount of time to get their schedule done. And so discussing what is their preference, because I want them going, at that time, I wanted them going to school in the most optimal method, which means that they're not rushed, they're not behind, they're not looking for things. So what is that number for them? And then talking about the after school routine, which I mentioned in another episode, is having alone time after school was very important, just 10 minutes. They, coming in, dropping off their supplies, their items, and then they go up to the room with no technology, nothing that's making sounds or flash, and they just spend 10 minutes and decompressing. That reduced behaviors from all of the pressures and unknowns dramatically. Discuss with your kids on their preference. And I discovered I needed to do these conversations not in one sitting, but multiple conversations, sometimes over 2 days, because their minds weren't quite ready to fully process, because they're like, I don't want to think about school. Or it could be the topic was a very sensory, overwhelming one. For example, the going to school in the morning and thinking about that routine, and maybe in the last year it wasn't a positive year. Give yourself time to have those conversations by bringing them into the process of planning when they will wake up and when they're going to bed. They will feel like they're working with you and things are happening to them. Okay, next one, practice. Number 4. So we need to practice. So 1 to 2 weeks before, you're going to discuss with your kids. We planned out what we wanted to do, but now we need to practice what this will look like. This is at a very minimum level, adjusting sleep schedules. I suggest first going with the bedtime, going to bed earlier, and then do that maybe for 2-3 days, and then begin waking up earlier. Now for your kids, when mine were younger, I found some very natural version of melatonin or herbal options for melatonin items. Again, I'm not a medical provider. I'm not telling you what to do, but my point being is when we have this change in our kids' sleep schedules, sometimes for a few days, that can be an option to help them adjust. And maybe for your kids, they're too sensitive, that won't work. Again, looking at, can they be going to bed earlier a couple of days? And then after they're going to bed a little bit earlier, because there's going to be some pushback, continue them going to sleep earlier and then add in waking up earlier. And in the beginning, I would just have them wake up earlier and just have a very soft start and working on like the general concept of what your routine is, with a goal to eventually go through an entire schedule. Like, hey guys, guess what? This is our practice day completely. And we are going in the morning. We're going to go through and just check to see, did we miss anything? Did we maybe forgot something for our morning routine? And you guys let me know and make them part of the process. And that can be at least one morning of them waking up, getting ready, doing the breakfast, the lunches, the whole 9 yards. Okay, last one. And this is, I find, incredibly important the older your kids get. And this is number 5, preview. Preview. We should preview their schools, their classrooms, and the routes they're going to be going to school. So this can be whether they're taking the bus. Again, this may seem like not a big deal, but going to a bus stop, if your kids do ride the bus, explaining like, this is where we stand, and you need to stand at this location until the bus comes to a stop. The expectations of being on a bus. Also, how to handle some of the issues that come with the bus. Personally, we avoided the bus as much as possible because of just my personal experiences. There were times we did use it, and I felt it was important to prepare my kids for some of the challenges that come. And bless those bus drivers, really bless them. They have a hard job there. But if they're not prepared for that, if they don't have, and even like a preview, especially if your kid's never been in a bus, if you have a chance for them to just go on a bus and see it, and it helps with all the unknowns and what could cause the sensory overwhelms and the meltdowns. It's like, I've seen a bus before. I know what that looked like. And even if you reach out to your bus company, they will begin doing practice routes. Usually I found somewhere between 1 to 2 weeks before school starts. And if you give a call to them, they might tell you when they might be practicing their route, and you can be outside and actually watch like, oh, this is the bus. And again, it's that visual image for them saying, okay, this is what I'm expecting. It's removing the unknowns. Obviously, if you're taking your kids to school, that's not as much of an issue. But if they are biking to school, if that is something that you feel that is within their capability, then again, it's getting on the bikes and doing that with them, understanding how that's going to work. And I know that, yes, that usually the first day of school, they have a lot of things set up for kids. My suggestion is I would do that a week beforehand, just practicing the bike route or the walking route that you have for them. And then discuss any type of unknowns that could come up. How would they handle it? And then actually practice it through. For example, if someone stops and talks to them, like these are things, if your kids are at that age, are able to do. A lot of our kids, that's not a possibility. But if it is, previewing this, practicing it is going to be so important. In the actual school, for them to understand, when I walk into this door, this is a route that I take to get from the door itself to my cubby area, my locker, whatever age they're at, whatever that home spot is for them to know what that is like. So when they, usually most schools have a preview day or they have like an open house. We have done multiple different things. Part of it was actually coming to the door. We knew ahead of time which door they would be reporting at, being at the door, practicing going in through that door, and then going to that classroom. And then we would do a tour of the school. And I might even go back a second time and go back to that door and have them on their own redo the whole process of getting from the door to their home spot. I also have them just practicing hanging up a backpack and where they're going to put their boots eventually, with it, rain boots or snow boots, depending where you live, their coat, understanding like where their name is, and then like their desk. This is their desk, and then setting up all their items in their desk. This is obviously geared towards elementary age. Having those things ahead of time is so important. If you can't make the open house or preview day, I highly, highly encourage you to reach out to your school, explain your child has sensory challenges and that you weren't able to attend and you really want to do this with them. Most schools are very, very open to this. Now, if you have kids who have lockers, whether it's middle school or high school, this is my suggestion, is one, walking through like how they're going to come into school as well and going to their locker, having them practice their locker combo 3 times at least, 3 times, because it's amazing what you forget. And most of those lockers are just not very well made and they don't open up well. Then getting the schedule out and practicing going from that locker, going to every single classroom that they will have on their list. And we walked through the entire building. And sometimes with one child, we actually had to go through the schedule 2 times because there was so much going on that they needed at first just to walk around, and they were just taking in their surroundings, and they're like, wait a second, Mom, I need to go back again because I wasn't really paying attention on the specifics. I was just trying to get an understanding. So we did tours, and I even gave a call to the school and asked us if we could come back another time when it was quiet. The takeaway I had was it was crazy during that open house for that middle school, and they weren't able to take in the information they needed because there was so much going on. So for them, they had to go through the school when it was quieter, understand where they were in relation to the room, and then they could, in their mind, know what their day was going to look like. We talked about supplies, okay, you have all this stuff. When are you going to come back to your locker? When are natural times for you to come to your locker? And you need to switch out your books. Lots of just task initiation, executive functioning that happens when you have a locker. It's not all in the one spot anymore. So by doing this preview, and also how are they going to come, for pickup time, where are the spots, what's the process and procedure, all of that would really help, because that is a lot, even for a kid with no challenges, that is a lot to process within a short amount of time frame. So by doing these 5 things, prepare, get all the different supplies that you have out and look it through. 2, purchase whatever is missing and considering your kids' sensory needs in that process. 3, plan, discussing and then working out a schedule of what the plan's going to be for the evening, morning, and after school routine. And then practice changing the sleep schedule first, the evening time routine, bedtime, and then changing the wake up time. And then finally preview, a chance to preview the school, the settings, so that they have in their mind, they're as prepared as possible. Again, if you're homeschooling, it's a little bit different, but I would definitely use the practice and preview options in your life, because having a schedule is obviously very important when you're at home. But I'm guessing you will have a couple of extracurricular activities, whether it's music or maybe it's jiu-jitsu or whatever activities you have going on, that will be happening. Instead of previewing those locations, if they haven't been there before, it will be very important for them. I hope this helps you in taking care of that overwhelmed feeling of starting school and makes it into a manageable process. And I would love to hear what are things that you have done to make this easier for you. So go ahead and send me a message either through Instagram or Facebook, and I'd love to hear from you. Hey, thank you for joining me today. I pray this episode gave you encouragement to take one small step. If so, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help other women find this show. By the way, if you're loving this conversation and want more encouragement like this, join my email list at bit.ly/myselfcare. That is bit.ly/myselfcare. I have a planner launching soon that will help you put all this into action in your own life. I look forward to chatting with you again next week for another episode.